Imagine if the focus of your work was to identify the most promising entrepreneurs, those who could potentially develop transformative and scalable food and agriculture solutions. Imagine working closely with those entrepreneurs as their ideas blossom and their businesses develop, from an organic gardening effort to tackle food insecurity in Silicon Valley to a company that converts organic waste into compostable bioplastic. How fun would this be? Such is the work of Renska Line, Director of Food System 6, a nonprofit California public benefit corporation based in the San Francisco Bay Area, whose mission is to support promising entrepreneurs who want to transform how we grow, produce, and distribute food. I'm Kelly Brownell, Director of the World Food Policy Center at Duke University and Professor of Public Policy at Duke. Renska has more than 20 years of experience working in the nonprofit sector on food, agriculture, and nutrition policy issues. Her work has included grassroots education and community organizing, strategic campaign development, quantitative policy analysis, and legislative advocacy. She co-founded Food System 6 with serial entrepreneur Peter Hertz and now runs 16-week mentoring programs for aspiring entrepreneurs, offering them business and organizational support, tools, training, and mentorship. Renska holds a bachelor's degree from Boston University and a master's degree in public policy from the University of California at Berkeley's Goldman School of Public Policy, and served in the Peace Corps. She began her career in Minneapolis at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, working on behalf of small-scale sustainable agriculture producers, and went on to build direct markets for Pennsylvania farmers in the Philadelphia marketplace. Renska, I find your work very inspiring. I've learned a lot from our conversations, and I'm so pleased you could join us.
I'm so happy to be here, and I love hearing that overview of our work. I do think I am among the luckiest people on the planet with the work I get to do.
Well, let's begin by asking the following question. How has your background in food policy informed the work that you're doing in the innovation and entrepreneur space?
That's a great question. So, as you know, Kelly, given your own legendary background in food and nutrition and agriculture policy, the landscape in food and agriculture is one that is very dynamic. And there really is, in my mind, no other system that really represents the way in which the public sector, the private sector, and the social sector really interact than in the food system. I've always been interested in solving problems at scale, thinking about how, we can make our food system work for more people, both those that steward our land and really shepherd it towards sustainable objectives, all the way through to, those, people in our communities that don't have enough access to food, and really thinking about scale around that. And, certainly sought the policy path as a means by which I could think about solving those problems at scale. And, that background and the time that I spent working in food and agriculture policy for around 20 years, really does help me also better support the entrepreneurs that are trying to innovate and bring really transformative solutions into the space, who may have incredibly deep technical knowledge or, technological expertise, business backgrounds, but aren't necessarily as up to speed on some of the complexities of the system and the ways in which, the system interacts with these other sectors, and of course, and in fact, the regulatory landscape that, really is wrapped around all of the companies that I'm ultimately supporting.
Well, I was going to ask if you could give us some examples of the kind of entrepreneurs that you have supported over the years.
I would love to. So I'm in the very fortunate position of supporting now 23 different portfolio companies. We have 17 for-profit startups in our portfolio and 6 nonprofit organizations. We're really excited about what we believe is a really important interplay of change makers. And so that's a big part of the reason we support both for-profit and nonprofit entrepreneurs and leaders. So you mentioned, Kelly, in your opener, a company called Full Cycle Bioplastics, which is working to transform and has developed the technology to transform all forms of food waste and what are known as cellulosic materials, so cardboards and things of that nature, into a completely biodegradable and fully compostable bioplastic alternative that can be used for packaging. So, there's obviously right now an incredible amount of attention rightly being paid to both of these problems, that this company is poised to, bring really transformative solutions towards both mitigating food waste and tackling some of the, really detrimental effects of plastic pollution in our oceans. So it's also very consistent with a lot of what we're seeing out there as far as a closed loop approach is concerned. So, there's a lot of companies, and another in our portfolio that I can describe, that are really working to identify, where is there an opportunity to extract value in this system and in the different processes associated with food production, distribution, and consumption, so that we might better close the loops, so to speak, and kind of, move our system from a really linear and extractive one to one that is more circular and really does, take into account the really virtuous cycle that can be, brought into life when you think about where is value, and where and how can that be captured. So that's one example. Happy to give more, of course, that there's many. So I'll let you tell me if there's time to talk about more.
Well, let me ask a more generic question. That one example you gave is very exciting. Boy, I'd love to learn about the engineering of that. But let me ask this. You must have a million ideas cross your desk and come to your attention.
Yes.
How do you make decisions on what might create the most benefit, what is most likely to succeed, what's most feasible, and things like that?
Yeah. And you're asking me at exactly the right time, because we're in the process right now of reviewing all of the applications that we've received for our next formal cohort program. So that's the 16-week program that you referenced in the introduction, and our next program will begin in February. And first and foremost, I will say it is, while a complex task, it is, I think, a very enviable one, because we are seeing some unbelievably interesting solutions really coming from all over the world. Our what we call top of funnel pipeline of innovations and entrepreneurs, numbers around 1,000 at this point. And really at this point, it's just a question of our being able to manage all the data that's coming in. So we're really excited about what we're seeing. As far as the decision-making process, first and foremost for us as a nonprofit focused on impact and really, driven by our mission, we're looking for that kind of alignment. So we want to understand that an entrepreneur is equally as passionate about really delivering a positive and demonstrable impact on some key dimension of our food system. So, that could mean either a social impact, obviously an environmental one, and then clearly looking also at human health outcomes. So that's our first screen. We have to start there. There's lots of amazing innovations that cross our desks that, really aren't necessarily thinking about transforming the system. They may be, a better for you cupcake, which, is great. And we think that that's certainly an improvement over the less better for you cupcake. But we're really looking for some of the truly game-changing innovations that stand a chance at transforming the system in some really meaningful way. So that's where we start. And then it goes from there to really analyze and assess, is the business ready for our support? Meaning, can we be helpful? So at the very early stages of a company's lifespan, when it's an idea, we're less positioned to help at that point. We certainly talk to entrepreneurs that are in that stage of, I have an idea and I really want to do something with it, because that passion is really important. So if we can, we do offer advice or guidance or simple suggestions on next steps. But really for us, we need to know and see some demonstrated traction in the marketplace. So some customer, and again, this is, we support both for-profit or nonprofit. So, somebody who has made it clear that they really are in need of this service and are in some way, shape, or form, engaging in the market.
It's fascinating how you select people, and it was interesting to hear that the passion of the entrepreneur is an important part of this. And I imagine the entrepreneurs that you are working with come with much different levels of experience from one another. So what kind of training do you provide them during these 16 weeks?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, that's absolutely the case, certainly, especially when you're working in the early stage with companies. They're, often teams of anywhere from 1 to 5. So they're quite small. 5 would be a luxury for some of the companies that we've, supported at their earliest stages. So they certainly do have a lot of talent and, vision and mission in terms of the product or service. But there's so much that's missing, of course, and so much that's needed to help them move beyond that initial traction in the marketplace to, moving towards the necessary steps for scale. So first and foremost, again, we focus on their individual needs. So the company, what is the team? What are their strengths? What are some of the areas that they know that they need support on? What are some of the next major milestones that they're working towards as a company? And we go from there to help build a program that really supports their individual needs. That we do directly, we roll up our sleeves and we really get to know these companies over that 16 weeks so that we're positioned to help them for 2 to 3 years after they leave our program. And, another big part of what we do is we want to build a community. That was a big part of our mission. When we were founded, we believed that there wasn't a community of change makers out there that was really designed to support these kind of innovative thinkers and these entrepreneurs. So we were really focused on creating a collaborative environment and an ecosystem where entrepreneurs are eager and willing to lean in and help each other. We do bring our companies together for 3 sessions in person over the course of our programming. And that is very robust programming that is designed to be helpful to any of the companies that we are supporting. So storytelling, public speaking, interaction with a wide range of different types of legal support, brand visual identity development. So how do you, put your story out in the world on your website, things of that nature. So that's really where we have the opportunity to add value to the whole group. And again, really start to foster some of the connections between them. And it's one of the areas that, we believe represents a real significant opportunity for building a strong constituent base around policy advocacy. So that's a particular passion of mine. So we definitely spend time talking to all of our entrepreneurs about the food policy world, what it means, and ways in which they can both individually and internally in their companies think about some of these bigger issues in the food system, but then also externally, what can they do? How can they be, really, they're in many ways some of the strongest advocates because they're living and breathing the change that they want to see happen.
I'd love to get your opinion on this kind of reciprocal relationship between entrepreneurs and policy. So, are there particular areas of policy where you see entrepreneurs gaining traction?
Well, I think there's a wide range of, sort of perspectives on what comes first. And, in terms of the kind of change that we want to see happen in the vision we hold for the food system. But I can certainly say that, for example, food waste, we talked about that at the beginning of the call. Over the last 5 years, that is a topic that has just exploded onto the national landscape from a variety of different sectors, in large part due to the pioneering work of ReFed, which is a nonprofit that really brought together many different stakeholders, including policymakers, investors, entrepreneurs, et cetera, to really identify how we could collectively as a country reduce food waste by a specific percentage, by a specific date. And I think that's one of the most interesting areas right now, given how much public awareness there is, how much consumer demand there is for alternatives. Companies like Imperfect Produce, I think, are really meeting a need for consumers to, both feel good about the fact that they're helping mitigate food waste by buying, fruits and vegetables that would otherwise have gone to waste, but also are able to, provide their families a healthier, fresher alternative. And, so that's an example of an innovation that can be bolstered and supported by some of the regulations that we see coming down, both on the state and federal level that, are really designed around creating incentives to support those kinds of innovations. So, that's one area that obviously has, a lot of great effort and momentum behind it, where I think some of the most interesting work is happening. But there are others.
Are there places where policy changes could support entrepreneurs better?
Oh, gosh, sure. The answer is definitely yes. I think it's just a question of thinking about by what means. So, for example, some of the incentives that, my home state of California are putting into place around both carbon emissions and, mitigating carbon emissions and looking for, identifying ways in which we can be reducing carbon in the atmosphere really can kickstart and galvanize an entire community of innovators that are bringing solutions into the market that can help support those objectives. And this obviously extends well beyond the food system, but that's, clearly the system I know the best. Similarly, initiatives at again, my state level here in California that are focused on investing in healthy soils with the, clear recognition that we need to be investing in soil health and soil fertility for all of the many, benefits that are associated with that, again, also can help spur, innovation activity that can help meet those objectives either for companies or for, farmers or ranchers. So those are the top of mind things. But, of course, there are many more when we think about our current production system and, what we call food system 5 and the industrialized food system. There are certainly areas of, regulation and policy that, if altered or adapted, as far as requirements are concerned, really can help spur, again, more innovative activity.
So Renske, let's go back to the training that you provide people, because I'm especially interested in the connections these entrepreneurs might form with one another.
Sure.
Do those end up being important personally and professionally for the individuals?
There's no question. So, we often say we're really here to provide a container of support, management consulting, those types of services. But ultimately, the entrepreneurs who are really the ones who are living their experience day in and day out of building solutions, often in markets that don't exist, can often be that can be a very lonely task. You can feel very isolated. You can, you're talking and living and breathing in a world that many people don't understand because they just, simply aren't up to speed on, why do we need insects as an alternative protein source? That's a hard thing to explain to people. You're really head down trying to build your business. It's really important for both morale as well as just sharing information. I mean, they are constantly interacting with different parts of the marketplace, and that's really important data and knowledge and information. So we see a lot of this happening. We see a lot of our entrepreneurs saying, hey, I just met with this retailer, or I just had this experience with this investor, and, they put this term sheet forward and, I didn't necessarily understand it. So I got some help, and here's what I'm thinking. Like there's a real giver mentality, certainly amongst the entrepreneurs that we support, because, and in general, I think that this is the case. If you're doing something that, is out to change the world, you're often a little on the fringes of what the world currently looks like. And so having that kind of community to really lean in and help support you on both the, really nitty gritty of building a business, because they're solving a problem that somebody else has solved before, as well as just kind of the content and the overall change making that the entrepreneurs that we support are really looking to do in the world. It's really important.
Renske, after listening to all this, I'm responding with a mixture of admiration and envy. Admiration because of the ingenuity of what you're doing and its social importance and the likelihood of doing things that really can be transformative. And envy because it must be as exciting as all get out. It just must be so much fun to be around all these entrepreneurial, creative people. So it's really nice of you to share the story of this, and I really appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely. Happy to.
So our guest has been Renske Linde, co-founder and managing director of Food System 6. And thank you to our listeners. Please subscribe to the Leading Voices in Food at Google Play, Stitcher, Radio Public, or Apple Podcasts, or by visiting our website of the Duke World Food Policy Center. This is Kelly Brownell.